Scott County, providing safe, healthy, and livable communities.
$1,000 over the next couple of years to take this step because it just struck us as the right and prudent thing to do. Sometimes we do the Lord's work even here at the county. So Leslie, with that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, we're here today to talk about the treatment court. I think they get the record for the most people in attendance for this discussion today, which is a good thing, because you've been very encouraging of partnerships and bringing that forward as part of these discussions. So Mr. Cleveland will have about 5 minutes, 6 minutes to talk about the program, update us on that, and then the panel will ask some questions, the audience, and then we'll turn it over to the board. But first we should do our introductions and go around the room and say who we are. Leslie Vermillion, the Deputy County Administrator.
Cindy Geis, the Property and Customer Service Manager.
Brad Davis, County Planning Manager.
Suzanne Arnson, Social Services.
Sergeant Jamie Pearson, Shakopee PD, and I'm the law enforcement liaison on the treatment court team.
Betsy Nevis, Community Corrections. I'm the probation officer for treatment court.
Rex Stacy, Judge.
Carrie Lorenz, Community Corrections. I'm supervisor.
Heidi Cast, I'm a coordinator for the treatment court.
Dr. Jennifer Schultz, I'm the psychologist on the team.
Courtney Pierre, I work at the Haven. We do Rule 25 assessments.
I'm Chris Wilton. I'm one of the judges.
Tim Cleveland, Director of Community Corrections.
Michelle Barley, Public Defender's Office. I'm the Defense Counsel for the Treatment Court.
Mike Butka, Assistant County Attorney.
And I'm Sandy Mater with Chemical Dependency in Scott County.
So Tim?
All right. Well, let me just first thank the board for adjusting their agenda today to allow us to go ahead of your other scheduled items. Thank you for doing that. We have an amazing treatment court team. We've got members who are very dedicated and have committed their time and their talents to improving the lives of the participants that we're working with, and they're doing it because they believe in what we're doing. We first came together about 2 years ago to begin a planning process to develop a treatment court that would focus on high-risk, high-need offenders whose criminal history was driven by their drug addiction. We also wanted to develop a treatment court that would address the underlying mental health issues that many of our population has. Our primary objective is to provide support for the long-term recovery of our participants in treatment court so that they can be productive and law-abiding citizens in our community. We began treatment court in October of 2016 with 2 separate courts, one with Judge Wilton and one with Judge Stacy. Treatment court happens every Monday, and for those individuals during the first phase of their treatment court involvement, they need to come to court every other week. So we alternate calendars between Judge Wilton and Judge Stacy. What's unique about our treatment court is that we have a mental health professional on our team, and Dr. Schultz completes a diagnostic assessment on everyone and helps them with referrals for mental health services. She's also a member of our team and gives us great guidance and insight into working with these individuals. We have had another thing that I think is really unique as I look at other treatment courts, drug courts, is that we have excellent cooperation with our law enforcement community. Sergeant Pearson and Chief of Police in Prior Lake, Mark Elliott, have been part of our team. They sit on our team and come to our staffings. They also coordinate with the other law enforcement agencies in terms of doing our curfew checks and communicating back to the team. So every Friday, Betsy Nevis, who is our treatment court probation officer, sends out updates on all of the participants that are appearing in court on Monday and helps us prepare for our staffings. We have staffings every Monday during the lunch hour to, again, people are dedicating their time to this process. So we're meeting over the lunch hour. At that time, we get updates on our participants, how they're doing, the progress they're making, and then the team really provides feedback for the judge in terms of what to do on that court calendar. Court then is at 2 o'clock every Monday. It is open to the public. I really encourage you, if you get a free Monday afternoon, to come and visit us. It's a very different court process than from what you would normally see in a criminal court case. A judge calls up each participant and talks with them about their progress and their struggles. We give praise and recognition for achievements and progress that individuals are making in the program, and we are providing swift and certain and measured sanctions and consequences or treatment responses for rule violations to help get that individual back on track. There is much less reliance on jail. Typically what we do in the corrections, criminal justice world, if a person violates their probation, we recommend 30 days in jail, 60 days jail, 90 days jail. We use jail very sparingly and are, again, trying to tailor our responses for their treatment needs. And if I could just ask Deb to draw our attention to page 7 of our measures. So one of the objectives of the program is that we are trying to get individuals within the program within 50 days of their referral. National research says that we can have 63% reduction in recidivism if we can do that. This particular measure shows we're doing a pretty good job. I think one of the reasons that it isn't better is that as we were planning for treatment court, there were a number of individuals that were on a waiting list. And so they started really longer than that 50-day period. So that's something that will improve over time. Another measure I want to draw your attention to on page 13. So the use of jail, again, if you look at this particular measure, I think as time goes on, I think we'll actually improve the length of time people are spending in jail pre-acceptance. But what's unique and I think a real plus is that since we've started treatment court, we've used jail only 426 days, I believe it is, which, for the 25 participants that we have is really pretty good. But I think it's something we've talked about and are focusing on and are trying to look at less reliance on sending someone back to jail for a consequence. So I'll draw your attention to one last measure, which is on page 14. So again, a typical response when somebody violates their probation is they serve periods of time in jail. So you'll see that really most of our responses that the judges are using are in treatment responses. So, attending more support groups or doing some journaling, going to a meeting and doing some journaling. We also use sentence to service or community work service as a consequence. Other sanctions, and then we've started to use electronic home monitoring more often. Other measures that we are in the process of measuring, and we'll be coming back to you in a year or so, we are looking at recidivism. So we're tracking whether these individuals are committing new crimes in our community. We have a comparison group of similar offenders that we'll be comparing them to. And we also will be tracking other measures such as employment. So for instance, right now we know that of our 25 participants to date, currently only 15% of them were employed at the start of treatment court, and we anticipate when they graduate that a much, much higher percentage will be employed. So with that, I will turn it over to the panel for questions.
All right, Suzanne, Brad, Cindy?
Well, that was easy.
Well, I'm going to ask them then if they don't have a question. On page 6. Talk to me a little bit about the 16% that have been denied and why or how come or what drives that?
I can answer that. I mean, we're the kind of the gatekeeper in the county attorney's office, and working in concert with law enforcement, if they're involved in violent crimes, we don't want any sellers, first-degree type cases, gang relations. Those are the things that have prevented them from entering our treatment court. We know what we can work with somewhat, on the team, and we know what might be more difficult, what might poison the well. So that's why we have a non-acceptance rate. But again, most of we wait to hear from law enforcement. We kind of give them a lot of credibility on what they say about certain offenders.
Okay. So violent crime, gangs, those. All right.
domestic violence.
The question I had on this measure is, I know this is a voluntary program. It looks like one of your screening criteria is the offender needs to be a resident of Scott County after the arrest. Why was that such an important factor, and how long do they need to be a resident of the county for them to be eligible for this program?
Well, I think we talked about residency because we have the casino. And so we get a lot of people that are Hennepin County residents and Ramsey County residents and Dakota County residents coming in and out of the casino.
Okay.
And so what we didn't want to do, we wanted to be selective for our Scott County residents. And if we would have opened it up to everybody that just happened to be driving through Scott County, especially with our numbers, our fear is that we would be spending our tax dollars on Dakota, Ramsey, and Hennepin, as opposed to those that have a direct benefit from Scott County.
I think the other major reason, too, is that we need to work with these people very closely, intently. They have to come back to court every 2 weeks. They're meeting with the probation officer weekly. They need funding typically through consolidated dollars, which occur if you're a resident of the county. And just being able to provide services in county for our own residents.
And part of the program includes the curfew checks. So it's really difficult to work with somebody who's living in St. Paul or Hennepin County to do the random curfew checks, because they do them pretty often.
And in the foreseeable future, you could anticipate every county in the state will have a treatment court. There's a big push at the state court level for that.
And staying on that same slide, I had a couple questions, and one of them was, I was a little bit confused by it when it talks about these are referrals, but yet it looks like they were referred when they wouldn't even have been eligible for the program, such as it's not really a high risk or they don't live here. And so I was confused initially why they were even included in the numbers, if they really should never have been referred to begin with. But the other thing that I thought about when I looked at this was, I do know that there are other treatment courts within the state, and how do we compare with other courts offered within other counties?
Well, we have the best one here.
Of course, that's exactly what I thought. I didn't see the slide on it, though.
How do we compare in terms of the numbers, or how do we compare in terms of what?
I'm looking at both the numbers of how many people that are referred that actually get accepted, and then maybe on the flip side of that, what do we see as some of the result, now understanding that we're only a year into it, so maybe we don't have the longevity that some of these other courts have had, but from the only 1 year that we have been active drug court, what do you see as far as some of the outcomes that have been achieved, or some of the big ahas or celebrations, and as well as some of the difficulties with where we're at, and maybe more so because of the number of people that we can have committed to this due to other things that we do. So I don't know how we compare to other counties as far as they have a drug court, and we have, a staff of a lot more people compared to the population of what Scott County has, and so there may be some other challenges.
Well, first of all, from my own experience, I was involved in the drug court in Dakota County, and so what I have seen so far is there's tremendous cooperation with our partners. There was good cooperation in Dakota County, but they didn't have nearly the number of members on their team. Law enforcement was not committed to doing curfew checks. There was no mental health component on the team. So I think with the county board's support of funding and the support of our partners, I think we have a better, stronger team. I think it's too early to say how we're doing in relationship to other treatment court, drug courts for our outcomes. And then there was another question about maybe
The referral process.
Yeah.
So with the high-risk piece, so we get referrals, either self-referrals from the jail, where they can contact me directly, I get them from attorneys or from the judges that they might see at bail hearings. They're not assessed. We use what's called a risk needs assessment, and so that's not completed till after I get referral. So that's why sometimes we don't know off the front end if they're high risk, high need, because we do that assessment on everyone that's referred. So then we would rule them out if they didn't meet. And then as far as housing goes, some people report that they're a Scott County resident, but as I'm screening them and you kind of dig deeper, you realize they're not really associated or have ties to come back to the community, so then it rules them out in that aspect. So some of that information we don't get till after the referral and they're screened a little further, so that's why we still consider them a referral.
The only other comment I'll make, which I think is something that we learned when we went through the national training, and that's different, is that our county attorney is willing to look at other felons besides just drug offenders. So in Dakota County, they're limited to, primarily 5th degree, 4th and 3rd degree drug offenders. But we've got other felons that have committed property crimes here that our county attorney is willing to let come into the program. And national research says that if you do that, you're going to have better outcomes because you're not just limiting yourself to those drug categories.
And also, I'm involved with the LeSueur County Drug Court as far as I was on the steering committee when it was implemented. I'm not the defense counsel for that court, but from attending all the steering committee meetings, I do know that one of the issues that court has run into is they do not have local law enforcement support whatsoever. It has made the process very hard with regard to referrals. But more importantly, with regard to the curfew checks, having that monitoring by law enforcement, the relationships that are developed between law enforcement and the participants, improving the viewpoint not only of the participants of law enforcement, but also vice versa. Both of those things are very positive and help the participant be successful in the long run. And it's gotten to the point where LeSueur actually has had to spend part of its budget to hire somebody to go out to do curfew checks. So they're actually having a lot more expense in running their treatment court as well.
Can I ask, and maybe piggybacking off of Cindy's question, in terms of the acceptance rates, how do the declines, the accepted, how does that compare to other jurisdictions that operate a treatment court? Is that where you would have hoped to be? Do you have targets in terms of where you would like to see those percentages?
In terms of acceptances? Mm-hmm. I don't know that we have a target of that. As Heidi said, lots of people refer and people even self-refer. And for instance, if they self-refer and they have a conviction as a felon in possession, they had a gun at some point, they're automatically declined for us. Or if they had a criminal sexual conduct conviction somewhere on their record, they might be a great candidate, but they're an automatic decline. So we are in a lot of respects, we take all the referrals and then make determinations on each individual case. So I don't know that we have a target number or a target anything, but when they come forward, we assess them, we take a look at them, and then we discuss as to whether or not they're a Scott County resident, or whether there is something that would keep them out of drug court. And finally, obviously, if the county attorney, through law enforcement, decides that this individual otherwise would be acceptable, if they have gang ties, or if they're a known individual that is a shooter or is violent, they have the right of first refusal to say, we're not going to take that person. So we never know what we're going to get. We're kind of dealt the cards as they come to us, as opposed to knowing what our target percentages would be.
And just speaking for myself, I've made a lot of inappropriate referrals for 2 out of my 3 sisters. They all live out of state. But, I think when we started, we were just looking to fill up. And I think we did refer a lot of people that on my part, I know now they would not be eligible, so I don't send the name on.
And to add to that, the targets that we had based on our grant writing, for year 1, our target was 25 participants, and we reached that. So in year 2 now, we've opened 5 extra slots, so our goal will be to hit 30, and then in year 3, we've increased it to 35. And that's kind of the national standard with only 1 probation officer on the team, is kind of that 35-to-1 ratio, so that's where we got the 35 from.
And here's the other part of that. We've learned a lot in a year. We've made a lot of mistakes at the beginning. I think Judge Stacy and I would both agree that we use jail very quickly early on. And we're more reluctant to do that. And part of that is having Dr. Schultz on board and discussing the cases and trying to figure out, what's right in each individual case. And as you can see, if you looked at the first 4 months versus the last 8 months, I guarantee you even the use of jail sanctions have decreased dramatically. And so we're getting better at it after a year.
Thanks.
I have a question about on page 8, which is your treatment court participant demographics. And my questions are, I see that you have a race, gender, age, and I'm not entirely certain if there's a key demographic from a location standpoint that also is evident to you that says, we really need to focus maybe a little bit more outreach and education in a certain community. And I know that there's, you may have a lot more from Shakopee, let's just say, just because the population is greater than it is in New Prague. But is there another factor that addresses that, or do we have any type of, have we done any type of further investigation on location? And then the other question that I have on this is, so I read early on that about 21% of your participants have some type of a mental health issue. Is there another factor in correlation with abuse, drugs and alcohol abuse, that seems to be another group of folks that we need to do some outreach with? So we know drugs, alcohol, and mental health is a combination that you were looking to address, but is there another core group within that realm that also seems to be something in the future that you're looking to provide some additional services?
Children who have been traumatized. And there are a lot of them.
Well, so maybe a follow-up question to that would be, I appreciate the need to get the treatment court up and running. Certainly have heard about family dependency treatment court, so it is around parents who are struggling with chemical addiction. And so, does the treatment team have ideas of what would needed resources to help consider expanding to additional populations like a family dependency treatment court?
I don't think we've talked about it yet.
Child protection.
The child protection is helping us, but in terms of family dependency, or the other one is DWI, treatment court, I don't think we're there yet. We're still trying to get our feet under us in regard to this. I don't know that we've studied where the people come from. I mean, I can tell you off the top of my head, we have people from New Prague and Belle Plaine, Shakopee, but I don't know that we've broken down by area. And again, a lot of it, comes to, it's a voluntary deal. And so you might have 8 people from one community that all look and say, it's easier for me to go to prison, or it's easier for me to opt out, as opposed to those individuals that say, yes, and I want to come in, and I'm eligible. I tell offenders all the time when they come in, treatment court's a pain in the butt. It's a lot easier to not jump into treatment court. Our officers go out there to their homes and knock on their doors 3, 4, 5 times a week at 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. For some, they'll do it at 10 o'clock and then 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure they're still in their house. They have to come see me or Judge Stacy every other week. They deal with Betsy a couple times a month. They're drug tested at least 2, if not more times every single week. And so we demand an amazing amount. And as our participants have said over and over, it's like a full-time job plus some. And it really is. When we talk about programming and treatment and diagnostic assessment, your mental health, and then all those other things, it is, it's a 360-degree look at a human being, and not only changing sobriety, but changing everything about them to get them to move forward. So, we have a lot of people, when they hear that, they'd be great candidates, but they just don't want to do it.
So One of my questions on it was you talked about unemployed, Tim. I didn't see education. Does education play a role in this, do you see? And then the other one was the age I found interesting. You have 6 people in this 41. Does that make a difference, doctor? Are they longer-term users, have struggled longer? Are they recently?
It seems like overall, they're kind of longer-term users that are kind of finally like, yep, I'm getting in. Sometimes, I think we maybe have had 1 or 2 people where it's their first treatment program. But I think these are the people that are saying, I'm tired of this, I'm ready to do something different. And that's kind of what's motivating them to get in.
A lot of them have been to prison more than once.
And they're on the verge of going back, and they just are tired of being that.
Which, if I can add, I think has been helpful for some of the younger participants as well, because then they get that kind of experience of this is what this could look like down the road. So they're getting the benefit of their experience from that.
Do you see a more consistent mental health disorder by age or education or any of these things in here?
Not that I know of. We didn't break that down, but I don't think there's anything that stood out that way. It's kind of, if you look at the slide that we have, they're kind of broken down.
Page 11.
We've got kind of 16% in a variety of different areas, so they're kind of fairly even across the board.
Do all of those folks, though, then go into some type of mental health treatment? I remember when Tim brought this and Pam, and we were talking about it at a workshop, it seemed like that mental health component was one of the most important parts of that success, and you've both mentioned it here, I think. So do all of these folks then go into some type of treatment then, or?
I think the majority of our people do. If it's individual therapy, I think is probably the number one, or doing some medication management. We've had to kind of figure out what the balance was between, from the mental health side, typically we are looking at it as we want people to come into services voluntarily. Not all of our people want to do that.
Yeah.
So we've had to kind of figure out what do we do, and I think we've kind of learned that over the past year that if we leave it up to them, or which is kind of more typical for mental health, they don't necessarily follow through.
So we started pushing a little bit.
Is that one of the things you've learned from this? You talked about things you've learned. Is that?
And that's one of the big ones. I can think of one individual who, we would talk and I would say things like, I'm encouraging you to reach out to Dr. Schull. And the answer would be, yeah, maybe, we'll see how that goes. And then a relapse, and then it's more of, this is what you will do. Go in, talk. If you don't like it, you don't have to keep doing it, but you got to give it a chance. If you want to move to the next phase, you got to give this a chance. And most of these people, when they do that, they enjoy it. It helps them. It helps them get their thoughts together and deal with potentially what's driving that abuse.
I mean, nobody wants to talk about the bad things that have happened to them. And a lot of these people have had a lot of trauma. So they prefer not to go because they don't want to talk about it.
And so that was our balancing act of trying to figure out. So because we figured, too, that if it came out that they were thinking, well, once you see Dr. Schultz, she's going to make recommendations, you're going to be forced to do this, then they might not want to tell me as much. But I think we've done pretty well overall with that. And I think the other participants that are doing therapy are pretty supportive.
I think we're trying to reduce the barrier to a certain degree, because it is something we talk about. We keep certain things confidential, but I mean, again, a number of our participants struggle with mental health issues, and so I think it's part of the conversation more, and I think hopefully taking away some of the stigma that occurs, that I have a mental illness.
My message is that to all of our people in my court is that everybody is addicted to something. Everybody has mental health issues, from just being in a bad mood to paralyzing illnesses. And this is what makes drug court so different, is you just change the terminology, the approach, and you really form a connection.
And then you have the group dynamic also. And so if 3 people have gone in to see Dr. Schull, and they sit up in the jury box and talk about that amongst themselves, and it's gone well for them, and she's not making a million recommendations, and they actually just get to go in and talk, they look at the other participant and say, it's actually helped me, and I like it, You know, people are more, I can tell them to do it, but when their peers look at them and say, this is a good thing, they're much more adept at taking that next step and doing it with an open mind.
It's a very powerful tool. When I call on our panel of experts, participants, they sit in the jury box as a group, and I routinely look to them for information or suggestions or how they will help whoever's standing in front of me. And they're invaluable, and they're blossoming. They're more and more prone to speak up. People that don't have a good history with the courts. And here they are, you know, helping somebody else. They're judge-like.
That's just an interesting comment you made, because several times in the last month or two, you know, we've become aware that one participant has reached out to another, encouraging them to turn themselves in or to take the good path. People who would never have done that in the past will more likely reach out so they could make a drug deal. So we've really tried to recognize their efforts and support them and praise them and support that pro-social behavior.
When someone enters the program, generally, how long would they be in the program, and when would you know that they would graduate from the program? I guess, knowing that we're new, again, and you've come from Dakota, and you've been involved in this, when do you know?
When do you know what?
That the people have overcome some of their issues, and they no longer need to continue to go through the drug court process, and they're more just on more of a probation type of a standpoint. And maybe that longevity of someone in the program is 3 years, and so we don't know that yet.
You know, we set it at 14 to 24 months, and we have phases, and so it's all written out in a manual. And if you want to get from phase 1 to phase 2, there are certain requirements that must be met. And then they're eligible to move to phase 2. We discuss it as a group at staffing, see if there are any concerns, and then we potentially move them to phase 2. Once you move from 2 to 3, there's actually a written application. And then it's 5 phases, and on phase 5, when you complete that, you actually graduate from treatment court. We've got, how many in phase 4?
4.
We've got 4 people in phase 4 right now, and we've been up for 14 months. So 4 people in phase 4 who are working their way toward phase 5 and eventual graduation. Some people take a lot longer than others. We have 1 or 2 that have been in there 12 months and they're in phase 2. And we've got 4 people that have been in there 13 months and they're in phase 4. So it's all individualized. There's no magic anything. They know what they have to do to continue to move along.
Has there been any of your participants who have been kicked out? And I understand that you have multiple reasons why, why when they fall off the cliff, let's just say, and they end up with some additional drug issues, and maybe they go back to court, or maybe they go to a treatment center. But are there people who've been kicked out of the program, and what does it take to have that occur?
Termination.
Excuse me?
We call it termination.
So I think, is it 4 that...
Well, we've had 3 terminations, we have 1 pending, and then we've had 2 people opt out. So we've had some clients that have just said, I'd rather just do my time, I'm kind of sick of doing this treatment game over and over, or they don't have a lot of time left. So to get terminated, either you have to pick up an offense that would make you ineligible. So if you picked up a violent offense or drug sales, those are automatic termination. Other termination criteria would just be if we've put a lot of time and resources in as far as giving treatment opportunities over and over, trying to get you into therapy and do a lot of the services that we're trying to provide, and they're just not complying or engaging in it, continuing the use, or just kind of not doing the requirements of the program, that can also lead them up to termination. So it's usually not like you had 1 positive UA and you're terminated. We tend to give people multiple chances and really try to find the right treatment programs, the right mental health services to make sure that we are giving them everything that they can, but sometimes it just isn't the right timing.
It's painful, but we have a waiting list. And you have to consider the people that are on that waiting list, and if somebody is not making progress and just, I've come to the conclusion a couple of times that forced sobriety is better than death with intravenous drug use, and cartels are cutting their heroin with fentanyl now and bragging that it's so powerful it'll kill you.
The other thing about the treatment court is that it really starts off pretty high intensive. Just like in someone's recovery, you put a lot of time and effort into it. In phase 1, phase 2, they're really involved. When they get to phase 4, the times they come to court decreases. So the hope is that as time goes on, they're out there getting their own, that's why we require the pro-social activities, so many meetings a week. It's, to move them on into their own recovery. They need a lot more support in the beginning, and hopefully not as much because they're doing it themselves at that point.
It's not any different than raising a child, right? High intensity is toddler into kindergarten, and then if you're grounding your junior or senior in high school, you're probably in trouble because they're going to go to college next year and do whatever they want. And so so by the time of phase 4 and phase 5, we're toning down because we expect that we've put the effort in, so have they, and they're going to have to get going and do this on their own. We do not kick people out of our treatment court willy-nilly. We bend over backwards. I mean, to keep them in, and I can tell you that we've had people that have failed out of 2 or 3 different treatments while in treatment court, and we don't boot them out. If there's effort there, if there's honesty, and if they want to work at it, we generally are willing to keep them. Now, there's some are just obvious. We had one individual who sat in our jail for a couple weeks, got into treatment. He was there about an hour before his friends picked him up, took him to the casino, and he was rearrested a couple days later. And the second time we got him out of jail to go to treatment, on the way in, he said to the staff, I don't think I'm ready for this. The staff turned around to take him back to jail, and he jumped out of a moving car. And so people like that's easy to make a determination. We spent all the money, time, and effort, and he made it to treatment for an hour. And like Judge Stacy said, we have a waiting list of people that need to get into treatment court. And so if you don't want to be here, then you make that pretty well known pretty quickly.
Jamie, could you talk a little bit about your visits? I remember Chief Elliott was so committed when he was at the workshop with the board. It seemed like such an important, what you found and what that's brought to.
Sure. So I can only speak for my agency, obviously. Every agency in the county has cops that are going out and doing curfew checks. Essentially, we do them the same, but it's a random check. You go to the house, you knock on the door. We're asking these people, how was your day? How was your week? We'll ask them, have you used? Is there anything I can do to help? Again, everybody is different. I spend a ton of time with these people. I've gotten to know a lot of them really well in our community. It's not like that in every community. I mean, it just depends how committed the officer is. So, I've definitely noticed, these are people that we've arrested multiple times, people that don't like the police, and they like us now. I mean, one of our participants, I was there when we raided his house, and he wants to do a ride-along with me. So, I mean, it's really amazing.
What's his stuff back?
It's really amazing to see that transformation, I don't know, 14, 16 months ago, we were raiding his house, taking him to jail, and now he wants to do a ride-along. So I think it's how much time and how much effort you want to put into it. I found it, for me, and again, I can only speak for myself, my partners are very good at what they do as well. Shakti puts a lot of time into our candidates in our city. So.
And I'll tell you, she's being humble because without her on this team, we would not be as strong as we are. I mean, I get to see him for 2.5 hours every 2 weeks in court, same as with Judge Stacy. Betsy gets to see him a couple hours a month, 2, 3. Sergeant Pearson sees them every single week, sometimes 2 or 3, 4 times a day. When they're thinking about using and they can't get a hold of anybody at 10 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning or 5 in the morning, they call her. And she answers the phone. She picks up a text. She got a text or a call at 5 or 5:30 the other morning, and on one of our clients who's pregnant and panicked, and she answers the phone. And so you asked earlier, what's the difference between our drug court and everybody else's? And we laughed at the beginning. Tim said ours is the best. I will tell you, you go to any drug court, you'll see most of the same participants. But what you won't see in Dakota or most of the other ones are Sergeant Pearson and Dr. Schultz and our 2 treatment people here, and one's not here. I mean, all these people come to our staffing and know these people on a first-name basis. And so that's what we talk about in terms of individualized. When somebody comes into court and sees me on a calendar of 30, I talk to them for a minute or 2, but I don't know anything about them. These people, we know anything and everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as I tell all the participants, if something bad happens tonight, you have all these people here to help you. All you got to do is pick up the telephone. And they do that nonstop. If we could clone her, we would do it in a heartbeat. But she is one of the most important parts of our treatment court.
I can add to that, too, that I just had some paperwork recently that a participant filled out for a diagnostic assessment where they were writing in who is their support team, and Jamie's on the support team.
All right.
There has to be something, though, in that attitude of that philosophy of it's not to imprison, but it's to get help. Your outlook on that. I mean, what is it you see that drives you to do that?
Well, I'm a cop. I mean, my nature is to help people, right? That's why I do this job. I don't know. I can only speak for myself, but if I can keep a pregnant person who's mid-20s out of prison, can keep custody of her child, potentially have a good life for herself, for her baby, I'll try to do that all day long. I mean, who wouldn't? In human nature, you're going to help that person, right? I mean, same with the ones that aren't pregnant. I mean, the answer is not, and not all cops are going to have the same outlook as I do, but I'm a part of this team, so, you know, I have a different outlook on it. But jail isn't always the answer. Jail costs money. You know, they get out of jail, and 9 times out of 10, they're using again. You know, it's just a different philosophy, and if you have an open mind to it, it's very interesting to see how it works, and it does work.
And we talk about all that, but there is also tough love. I mean, I had an individual ask me to be released for Christmas to spend with his family on Monday, and I said no. I mean, you look at the individual and you sanction them individually, consistently, but that's what we're dealing with is individual people. And, you know, obviously when Sergeant Pearson treats them with respect, I think all of our participants would tell you that they don't like the police, and they've treated the police badly, and they believe the police have treated them badly. But it's amazing when an officer treats somebody with respect, how different the outlook is. Or when they go to the door and knock, and they PBT them, and it's zeros, and the officer gives them a high five and says, "I'm so proud of you," and walks away. I mean, that is an indelible impact and impression left, as opposed to, I'm kicking your door in because I'm raiding your house again, or I'm putting you in jail again, or we're locking you up again.
And that's something that obviously takes time to build that trust, because it's a whole new world for, even, you know, a lot of times I think for corrections to change their views, you know, it's just, it takes a lot of effort on the participant side too to.
Yeah,
Well,
it's an
I'll try this
underpinning
journey.
of drug court. These are people that have lost everything. Every worldly possession they ever had, their families, their loved ones, their friends, and they're looking for a connection, for a little self-respect, and for judges and cops, probation officers, treatment providers, attorneys to treat them with respect. It's a door opener. It really opens the door and creates possibilities.
What's been fun to see, so we've celebrated the holidays the last 2 court sessions and provided cookies and pizza. and invited the participants' family members. So last week, one of the grandfathers got up at the end, and he just wanted to thank all of the participants and then turn and thank the team. But he was so proud of his grandson, who now had just had a baby, and he was so hopeful.
His wife had.
Yeah. His wife just had a baby.
Guys can't have babies.
And then this week, I was talking to one of the fathers of a participant, and he said, after 30 years, I'm finally proud of my son, because he's been using probably since he's 11 or 12. And he said, I guess I had something to do with it. I didn't quit using, and he's recovering alcoholic till I was 42. So at least he's doing it when he's in his 30s. But just even talking about that and the hope that there was for his son's future. So that's been exciting.
Well, the other part of it is that we've got to keep in mind is we are taking the high risk, high need. We are taking, when we get a new candidate and Jamie talks to the police officers on the street, generally they say the following: yes, they should go to treatment court, but they won't make it, and they're crappy people. I mean, because the cops have had so many interactions with these people where they've been so disrespectful to the police, and so we are taking the hardest of the hard cases into treatment court, and it's been an amazing transformation for so many of these young people and even older people that wouldn't get off their mom's couch and all they did was use in the basement, and now they're like different human beings.
Another piece I should clarify too for law enforcement, we are there for that support piece, and we have gotten to know these people and gone out of our way for them, X, Y, and Z. But on the flip side, if they're not following the rules of court, drug court, and the judges issue a warrant and things like that, I've also gone and knocked on their door and arrested them on their warrant and took them back to jail. So it's not all, it's not a free pass for them either. I've written, they've gotten, some of them have gotten tickets and things like that. But so there's two sides of it too.
At my Christmas party, we played a motivational tape that I thought that, what?
Did you have dumplings?
No, no dumplings. And maybe you've seen it. It's Chris Farley. Is Matt Foley a motivational speaker?
Down by the river?
Yeah. Straighten up, or you'll be living in a van down by the river. It's very well received.
So you said you've learned some things, and where do you want to be a year from now when you're back here in front of the board talking? That was kind of one of the commitments, was to bring them back. What would you hope to see differently, or where would you want to be?
Given the substantial financial contribution, I'd like to see 5 times the number of people, because they're out there.
In the short term, in a year, I'd like to see a number of our graduates come through. That we haven't gotten that far yet. I've only heard about graduations, how great they are. But to follow these people from day one to that point, those will be great days. And obviously we can improve. We can get better with every staffing, with new techniques and new training and new information. It's ever evolving. So, my hope is that we get better and we get people through.
We're looking at doing some basic things too about possibly, I do the diagnostic assessment up front, but then these people are in the program for quite a while, so possibly doing some screenings as we kind of go through, so every maybe 90 days or so following up with people, so that if we, if they didn't have mental health issues up front, something may have come up, so we're making sure that we're catching that too as we go along.
What about from the attorney's viewpoint?
These were our chronic offenders. They were being arrested all the time. Petty stuff, a lot of shoplift thefts. They were just looking for that money to get the next high. So we're looking to, our resources, if we get these people, get them sober, we take away that criminal thinking, we turn them into productive citizens. So we've cut down on that generation and hopefully possibly eliminate something of the next generation's drug addicts and all the fallout from that. So we reduce our resources there, and we can apply them other places where, county attorney has to go. Where we've already been provided for in the CHIPS area, that's growing because of, the addictions that are running rampant. But maybe it reduces some of our, felony prosecutions, or certainly our petty and misdemeanor prosecutions.
I obviously deal with them as clients, so I always look at it as more of an individual success thing. I have a drawer, my memory drawer, where I've had letters from clients, who have written me like 5-10 years after the fact and thanked me for where they're at. So my goal is a little bit further out than a year. I mean, I would obviously love to see all the graduations, but I really would like to see where our graduates are 5 years from now. And hopefully, they're still going to be on the right track and having the life that they deserve.
I look forward to the little successes, like the people who come in even though they know there's a warrant. The woman who runs from the transit center all the way to the government center just to be here on time. Or someone that comes in, just completed treatment and says, well, I used. To me, that's what makes me happy when I hear that.
You've talked a lot about Mr. Shelton today, but it had to be a year and a half ago. Wilton and I had lunch with Gary because we're trying to curry favor with him. Gary asked us why we didn't have a drug court. And of course, we were talking about it. And one of the points Gary made was, if you do, don't you need a mental health component? And he was right. Once we started looking into the nuts and bolts of drug court, it's you have to have a mental health component. It's all dual diagnosis. Every one of them, in my opinion, is dual diagnosis. So there's another plug for Gary. Now where you turn the damn heat up.
So are there any questions from the audience out here before?
I have just two questions, and they kind of piggyback on one another. One, I'm very familiar that it's great to see the Haven here present, but I'm also aware that we have really limited resources for chemical dependency in the area. So I'm kind of curious what kind of challenges that poses for this program. And then kind of to piggyback on that, are there things that the team sees as other gaps? Are there other things that are potentially barriers to folks being successful?
Well, the biggest thing I see as obviously the defense attorney is that we're housing people in jail while we're waiting for availability at a treatment center because there's no other options here. We can't send them home for whatever reason, but there's no other place to put them, like a detox center, anything. So we're housing people in jail, the very high-risk ones, the ones who we think may overdose on heroin before we actually get them to treatment, because there's nothing else. There's no other alternative. We need another alternative.
Yeah, we need a sober house.
And I remember doing this for the CD unit, and I talked about the same thing at that time, is that in Scott County, we have one outpatient treatment program, which is the Haven, and we're very grateful for them. But if a person needs a dual diagnosis program, we don't have anything in Scott County. We have to send people to treatment 2 hours away down in Rochester. They might go to St. Cloud, they might go to New Ulm, and we know that they can start their sobriety day there, but they're all going to be coming back to this area, and then they have to start anew with finding their sober support. We have Five Stars has one sober house for women in Shakopee, and they have one sober house for men in Shakopee, and that's it. The closest program that allows medication assistance is Sage Prairie. They offer Suboxone with their treatment center because they have a doctor on staff, and that's on the Burnsville-Egan site. If we want somebody to go to a female-only program, that's not going to be in Scott County. A male-only program, it's not going to be in Scott County. That's really what lacking. Also, the transportation. It's really difficult for people to get to meetings, which are at night, that start at 8, go till 9, and you want people to stay afterwards for the camaraderie of being in a meeting. But with lack of bus systems late at night, they can't, it's really hard to get to. And medical transportation doesn't give rides to AA meetings or NA meetings. One of the things that we're at least discussing now is the Haven has offered the possibility of doing a meeting right there at their center for the people who are in drug court. So that's really new. It hasn't started yet, but at least it's been discussed. So from the CD world, that's what I think we're lacking is services for our people.
We also, part of our next step, we call it that, is reaching out to the community. What we're going to call it, a community advisory board. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'd like to, potential employers, contributors to our incentives. You know, I mean, they're not much, but it's, people will really light up over a $10 gas card if you have nothing.
Other questions? Mr. Chairman, we'll turn it over to the board.
Leslie, thank you. Commissioners, comments? Commissioner Ulrich.
Well, I'll pick up on the gas card. Just, it's a stray thought, but you've probably heard of FISH, Families and Individuals Sharing Hope. It's a partner network of nonprofits, service groups, local government, business, and the faith community. And you can post a need on there, and the need will get met. Let's say we meet needs, real needs right now. And so I would encourage you all to explore that FISH network. There's no cost, there's no, it's all benefit. It's not, it doesn't, you know, you can post needs get met. We've got 500 partners and affiliates in our community, Scott County, that are there meeting needs and posting needs. So I'm sure you see a lot of needs that could get posted. So we got to figure out a way you become a partner or an affiliate that you can post and meet needs through this network. It's community-based, and
thank you.
It'll be a big help. Okay, so one question that I do have is that based on what you're seeing and your experience and the principles you're learning and all that stuff, do we need a veterans court? I mean, that, you know, Gary asked a question at lunch, why don't you have a drug court or a treatment court? I guess my question is, I know there's probably a lot of crossover, you probably deal with a lot of veterans, but veterans are coming back, you know, some from their service are coming back as better and stronger, more character individuals. Some are coming back really damaged. So that's just my question. Is there something that we're learning here that could transfer to veterans? Is there a need? I don't know, but go ahead.
I'm looking into it. I haven't talked to any of these people about it yet because I went to a wedding in downtown Minneapolis on Friday night and met a veteran. He's big in the VFW. He lives in Florida, but we exchanged cards, and he's going to have a commander with the VFW contact me here in Scott County. And I don't know if we have the numbers, but this is a great unknown. So few people know. There's a statute that requires a judge to ask every single person he or she sentences if that person is a vet on misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors, felonies. And we never do that. We never do that. And so there is a veterans court in Carver County, but just for a lack of participants, it's really gone nowhere, right?
Well, their numbers have increased. I mean, our office is involved in the Veterans Court in Carver County, and their numbers have been increasing lately. So,
But
Well,
before I
I'm
ask
going
the
to
question,
enlist-
before I ask the question, I Googled, there appears to be one in Washington, Anoka, Carver, Ramsey, and Hennepin. And there's a multi-county veterans court somewhere in the state.
Yeah.
I just quickly Googled it to see if, but there is something.
Certainly in the cities, you know, they've got
We
huge
discussed it
numbers.
in the county attorney's office, and I'm all for it. In Carver County, it works, they read an announcement. If you're a vet, let us know at their first appearance or your arraignment on a petty or misdemeanor type thing, and then they kind of channel them one way. They don't have great participation, don't have great numbers, we'd have a little bit more. I think we duplicate a lot of things we do here. I don't think it would take much. You know, we'd have to find maybe a judge or something to set a special session every month to deal with the veterans, give them same type opportunities, you know, kind of keep it off their record if they do things. I mean, we work with the Veteran Service Office, I would imagine. You know, we have a veteran right now in our treatment court, and I think it's something that, you know, we'll probably discuss here in the next few months and see what we can make a go of it. I don't think numbers are that important. I just think having that option available, because the statute, state law kind of dictates that we do look into it and do put it together.
in Carver, they are really good. If they come through the jail and also law enforcement, they do get most of their referrals through law enforcement and through the jail. That's how they, and it'll come through right on the roster. Like in the morning, the jail roster it has it right on there so that everybody is immediately notified that there's a veteran in custody. So it does work.
Mr. Chair, I could also comment on that.
Trostberg? Yes.
As Mike already stated, that we've already talked about veterans and including them somehow in what we have going on here, and we're certainly not opposed to that. Like I've told Mike before, if you have a veteran come through, even for the drug court, give them extra consideration and try to get them in. I think that's something that the Veterans Court, without even calling it that, could be easily just incorporated into what we have going on now and just expanded a little bit to include the veterans in that. So with Judge Stacy, Judge Wilton, let's get going on it.
Good, thank you, Ron, appreciate that. Commissioners, anything further? Commissioner Bricky?
Oh, and you've answered most of my questions. Thank you. It's been wonderful. I wish we had well, I guess we do have Jamie's statement on videotape. I think it is wonderful, and we should use that. My question, and just maybe a brief answers about how many of your participants have children? I think Judge Stacy referenced childhood trauma. What are we doing for those participants who have children, and how are we making sure those linkages are made with our other departments?
Do you want to talk about that?
Go ahead. Betsy might know how many.
Yeah, how many?
I don't know how many.
We, right now, we have 3 participants that have physical and legal custody of their children. Some of the participants, there's 2 that have had their rights terminated of their children due to drug use. We've recently had meetings with Child Protection to make sure that we are collaborating with them to make sure that there's a safety plan in place for the children and really make sure that they are a focus of that person's treatment plan so they're not put in harm's way and that they're taken care of in the case that somebody would be taken into custody. It was stated too that we do have one person who is currently pregnant. So I have met with her child welfare worker and we are collaborating on treatment updates and things like that to make sure that she has the resources that she needs to work and maintain her sobriety while she's pregnant. So that's something that we identified as a need within the last, well, it's always been a need, but it's something that we've really been working on and collaborating on more in the last few months, so.
So we
And
actually.
she's a vet.
And she's a vet.
We just, actually, in the last couple months, had a meeting with Suzanne and her 2 of her supervisors in Child Protection, and we drafted up a kind of it's like a memorandum of understanding, but it's a document in terms of how we're going to proceed in the future. So beginning January 1st, any of the participants that have an open child protection case, the child protection worker will be invited to the staffing. And then we'll be making sure that we've got releases signed so that we can communicate with each other. And then they're certainly invited to sit in on the court hearing if they want to, but again, to try to improve our communications.
Great, thank you. And just to follow up to that, I think that's great because we know that this can be generational and anything we can do to stop it. My law partner actually is a mentor over in the Veterans Court, Carver County. So is there a place for community mentors in the drug court, or is that something you've talked about? You know, maybe even specifically for parenting, specifically for other issues that people
Well,
are
your
having?
partner is intimately familiar with our participant who is now pregnant and is available to her at any time. But mentors, probably be a good idea. You want to do it?
Just a thought. No, I don't think I should be a parenting mentor. That's not going to.
Well, see, that is, now, that would be part of our, if we try to involve the community more. And I know it's, you know, we certainly wouldn't want anything to go wrong. But I think that it's part of that, right? If we possibly have mentors and.
We've talked a lot about having.
Some of our graduates
Right.
have expressed an interest in wanting to be mentors, and then, or assisting us with support groups. It's one of the problems that we see is some of our participants don't particularly like the support groups that they go to and don't feel comfortable, and so one person in particular has expressed an interest in maybe starting a group here.
Yeah, and that is someone who was just on the edge at the beginning, one of the older people, who seemed to do better than the younger people and serve as a role model. He was not invested at all, but over time, I mean, he's gotten to the point where now he's thinking of starting a group at the Haven.
And I think, hasn't he got a year's sobriety, is that correct?
13
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
I mean, this person's been to prison. I mean, it's just really amazing.
He told us all at our last session that this will be the first sober Christmas he can recall.
Or not in jail.
Yeah. Well, they have he and his girlfriend, who they shared a life of addiction and jail, and they're grandparents.
That'll change your life.
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner Brecky, you finished?
I'm done.
Commissioner Beer.
Yeah, this is really a beautiful thing. You know, instilling life, giving life. And this is not a trick question, but what do you think you collectively instill, or what do you hope these people walk away from in one word? Or very few words, and it can be multiple words. What's the difference?
It's hope. When they start, they have no hope. And most of them will start and say, I just don't want to go to prison, so I'm going to do this to keep me out of prison. And as time goes, we instill hope. And, you know, Judge Stacy talked about the person that, you know, can't remember the last Christmas he served sober. We've got one in our treatment court right now that for the last 7 years, he's never been home because he's either been in prison, in jail, or on the run from the police. This will be the first time in 7 years that he goes home to spend Christmas with his family. Wow. We've got another young lady who's 20. She's going to start college at Augsburg in January. And a year ago, she was a nightmare. And so, you know, you look at, and everybody's progressing. And it's an amazing, you know, you look at where they started to where they are now, it's an amazing transformation to watch them move. And, you know, none of this would be possible without you. I mean, without you funding this, we would not be here. We would still simply be putting people in jail. There would be, I guarantee you, more deaths, more ODs from a number of our participants if this treatment court wasn't here today. And so, frankly, we have you to thank for the financial backing and the trust and all the rest to get this off the ground. And you know, whether you know it or not, you have made, just in this, a gigantic impact on at least 25 lives, plus their loved ones, and their parents, and their children. It's exponential.
Most days, I feel like I get more out of it than they do.
That's true. Mr. Beer?
Tim, you, in our last advisory board, you showed that, I think, a Netflix movie, maybe?
Oh, yes.
Heroin, kind of a play on words there. And so I'm sorry to say I have not been able to observe the treatment court. Is that a
Very
fair
realistic,
representation?
yes.
So if any of us have not seen that, it's a
Is
good,
that the
It's
three?
on Netflix. It's called Heroin E.
Yes, it's good.
just to get a little insight
40
into.
Yep, documentary. In the heroin capital of the country, was it West Virginia?
I don't remember this.
West Virginia.
Sounds right, yeah, doesn't it?
Where they have overdoses every single day, and it follows 3 women. One is a treatment court judge, another is a,
Pastor,
Marshall.
yep,
pastor.
yeah, and just the struggles that they're seeing in their community and trying to turn things around.
It's just a good look of, what outcomes can happen. Thank you.
Commissioner Albrecht.
We're proud of you and your efforts, and I don't think, amiss by saying, I think of all the votes that we've taken, I think we're happiest with this as one of our votes. I mean, we vote on a lot of things, but this you've made us proud for your efforts.
Spent. Yep. Mr. Judge Wilton, you said it was Shelton's idea?
That was Judge Stacy that said that.
Apparently he wants to heat up, right? Let me go back to Chambers and look at my thermostat, and I'll get back to you on that.
Administrator Shelton.
We moved it up 2 degrees.
A couple of questions so Judge Stacy, you said that the state court was looking at trying to expand this to make sure that every county had a treatment court.
It's a major initiative, yeah.
Do you know where the legislature and funding for that is at?
No. A lot of it will be, well, a good portion is in the court's budget.
Yeah, I'm somewhat aware, Gary. The hope is that they would provide funding for a halftime coordinator. We were told initially when we started that we were eligible for, it was like $52,000. And then because we got the federal grant, that's kind of been put on hold. But we're hoping that once the federal grant is done, that we could get access to that, at least that portion. So that's, I think, where most of the money has been going, is to assisting with hiring of coordinators, and their ratio is like a halftime coordinator for every 25 participants. And then they're also funding a statewide coordinator.
But
I'm sorry.
But not really anything that actually makes it function. I
No.
mean, the coordinator
Yeah.
position is important, but I think what's evident here is it's all the other participation that makes it work.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Okay, so another question that I had, Judge Stacy, you said that your goal would be have 5 times as many participants.
Yeah,
But is there a way the courts could ever, so in a wonderful world, if everything else was available, is there any real practical way, and I see our law enforcement officer shaking her head no.
I mean, the simple answer is no. Right now, we
well,
don't have,
there is.
well, we don't have enough courtrooms. We don't have, I mean,
But they're going to fix that.
in a perfect world, yes, we could have 5 times the amount. But practically speaking, we might be able to double in size. But I think also when you get too big, you have other issues. You don't want to water it down. That becomes the biggest issue. We don't want law enforcement to be watered down. We don't want our probation officer to be watered down. I don't want 40 participants in my courtroom where I can talk to them for 30 seconds each and we just pass them along. I mean, what you have now and what you would see now is actual interaction between all the participants and the players, which is what I think is vitally important.
So the key component, if you want to expand, is really to make sure the resources expand at the same rate.
Exactly right.
But Judge Wilton and I, maybe to a lesser degree, over the last several years, have taken a different approach with addicts, and best illustrated by Ms. Griffith, who Wilton worked with for 5 years. She was never in a drug court. She made 27 court appearances, review hearings, where he would talk to her and ask her what was going on. And she ultimately She's been clean for 3 years? Heroin addict, injecting heroin, and she has a baby. She just got married and asked Wilton to marry her, and he was on the Sunday morning show. You know, the one right before Face the Nation? I watch it every week, and there he is.
No wonder you turn his thermostat down. My temperature in my courtroom, perfect.
But that's the effect, one of the effects it's had on me and Wilton, is we handle cases differently, almost every case. And people that can't get into drug court, we tend to keep those for ourselves so that we can follow them, so that they see a familiar face when they're rearrested or have a court hearing. And so we can kind of reach out for them. And ultimately, it's surprising too, that if somebody decides they just can't make it and they're going to go to prison, Wilton will attest to this, I've had several say, I want you to send me, because you cared. So I end up sending them to prison, right?
That just leads me to one last question or observation, I guess. I know the program lasts for 24 months or perhaps longer, it depends upon the individual. But I think Michelle's comment was probably the most accurate. What really matters is where are people at 5 or 6 or 7 years from now? Do you have in place yet, or have you thought through a mechanism to hand them off? Because addiction is a hard, and I know that the program's goal is for them to have some sort of support mechanism by the time they graduate. But have you looked at that support mechanism long-term? Because this type of a problem, you don't really resolve probably ever, but you certainly don't absolutely resolve it in 24 months.
You're right. Personally, I see graduating from drug court as not the end, it's the beginning. Recovery's lifelong. But I don't think we know how.
I think that, Gary, to answer your question, I think what we're trying to do is have them have those natural supports built in for themselves. And so that's why we're really pushing when they get out of primary treatment, they get out of sober housing, that they are required to do at least 2 support meetings a week, so that because that's going to be their support, and then, getting their family involved. Because once the system's out of there, they're going to need that support, and we can't, as a government agency, we're not going to be able to provide that for them. So that's really our goal, is that self-sustaining recovery.
And they will be on traditional probation for a period of time upon graduation as well. So depending on what that looks like.
And I was just curious as to whether or not that was at least a planning component. To build the structure under that house before you send them on their own way.
Would be nice.
Good deal. Thank you, this has been an amazing, yes.
Thank you.
We've got through how many of these Scott County delivers now, Leslie, and this has probably been the most impactful one from this
Open
commissioner's
invitation,
perspective. Thank
please,
you.
anytime you want to come to court, on any kind of calendar.
I think we should put judicial ride-alongs on our calendar, members, and go do that. So, thank you very much for your service to the community.
Mondays in too.
Oh, no, sorry.
We got a couple things to do yet here, if we can do them quickly, because I got to go get Mrs. Beard.
We give the reports, commissioners, and